Written in as I asked. So let's see what we have. I don't usually bring my phone in the pulpit, and I just remembered to put it on vibrate. That was a good idea, right? So let's see what we have. Blank Thomas. I'm on Facebook. And the first is the obvious one, Doubting Thomas. How many of you thought of the word Doubting Thomas? Yeah. The first one that comes to my mind is Danny Thomas. And my wife said, "It shows how old you are, Frank." Well, thank you, dear wife of 42 years. I appreciate that. Actually, 43 years. So here are some others that people have written in because they kind of wanted to break the mold and not just have Doubting Thomas. Here's one that says, first one on YouTube was Doubting Thomas. Then someone says Courageous Thomas, not wanting to go with the normal first response. Here's Overcomer Thomas. Magda Braga said Courageous Thomas. Someone says, Christina Erickson says Cautious Thomas. I can see that. Robert Smith says it can't be Thomas. Pretty good. It can't be Jesus. David Cavastan, I like this one. David says, relatable Thomas. We can relate to Thomas. That's very good insight. Jackie Beecher says, carnal Thomas. And there are lots more who actually say Doubting Thomas. I'm just skipping through those. So, someone wrote in All In Thomas. It maybe gives a little different view of who Thomas was. When I hear the word Thomas, I have a grandson, so I would take the blank and put it on the other side, and it would be Thomas the Train. I'd flip the place where the blank is. He was all wild about Thomas the Train. There are lots of ways to fill in the blank, but unfortunately, as Christians, most of you knew that I was talking about Thomas in the Bible, and as Christians, we oftentimes just think of Doubting Thomas, because for us, that is the most familiar response. But I want to look at Thomas just a few minutes today because I think he is relatable. I think we have given Thomas a bum rap, and I'll show you why this morning. Turn with me in Scripture to Luke chapter 24. Luke chapter 24, verse 36. Luke 24, 36. Just a little bit of background to this text. In Luke 24, you've had the story of the two disciples meeting Jesus on the road to Emmaus, and they immediately come back to Jerusalem, even though it was dark and the road was long and the road was hilly and dangerous. They ran back to Jerusalem as quickly as they could, and they went to the upper room where the disciples had gathered for fear of the Jews. And they were there in the upper room, and they said, "We've seen Jesus. He appeared to us on the road to Emmaus." And they were told, "He has appeared to Simon, and Mary has seen him." And then verse 36. As they were talking about these things, the disciples, others gathered in the upper room, not just the 11, Actually, the 10, because Thomas wasn't there. The 10 plus others were gathered in the upper room because Cleopas and his friend weren't numbered among the 12 disciples. So I want you to see there's more than just 10 people in the upper room right then. And what happens? As they were talking about these things, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace to you." Now, peace is hardly what they were feeling. I mean, a guy that they've seen die and buried is standing in their midst. Verse 37 says, "But they were startled and frightened and thought they saw a spirit." So peace is hardly what they were fearing. They were scared. Their knees were probably knocking. They're afraid. They were startled and frightened, and they thought they'd seen a spirit. And he said to them, verse 38, "And he said to them, 'Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your hearts?'" Whoa, there's that interesting word. We say doubting Thomas. But here are 10 other disciples in the upper room, plus others. And Jesus says, "Why do you doubt? Why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have." And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. I think we've given Thomas a bum rap, because all of the disciples were fearful. All of them were scared. All of them were doubting. Last time they'd seen Jesus, or maybe we should say it this way, last time Jesus had seen them, all he could see was their backs because they were running away from him. And maybe that was also making them doubt. Maybe that was also making them fearful. But notice what Jesus says. He says, "Look at my hands. Look at my feet. Touch me. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have." And when he said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. He does for the other 10 exactly what Thomas wants. So Thomas, and we're going to see that's part of the story in a moment, Thomas is not asking for something. This is what I want you to see. Thomas is not asking for something that Jesus had not already done for the other 10. As a matter of fact, I find this connection here to be connected to a prophecy in the book of Zechariah. Go to the Old Testament with me. Hold on. We got to find Zechariah. He's stuck in there. Here we go. Zechariah 13, verse 6. And we believe this is, it has another setting, but we believe it's prophetically referring to Jesus. "And if someone asks him, 'What are the wounds on your back?' he will say, 'The wounds I received in the house of my friends.'" You know, I believe that Jesus will bear the wounds of the sacrifice on the cross throughout all eternity. They will be the wounds in Jesus' hands and feet and his side. Those wounds will be the only remembrance of sin in the new world. Everything else will be wiped out. But in the new world, Jesus will still bear the scars in his hands and his feet and his side as evidence of how much he loves us. And so here, Jesus is saying, look at these wounds. He will carry those wounds for eternity. And then he asks for something to eat, because ghosts don't eat. And so Jesus is trying to show to them that he is indeed who he says he is. He is a being. He is alive. Now we pick up the story from there in John chapter 20. John chapter 20, verse 24. John chapter 20, verse 24. Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. The name Thomas in in Hebrew, and the name Didymus, you'll find that sometimes in the Greek, means the twin. And so Thomas had a twin. There's been lots of interesting ideas of who his twin was, and I'm not going to chase those right now, but evidently Thomas had a twin. And so one of the 12, called Thomas the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." Now, here's a question for you. Why hadn't Thomas been with the other 11, because Judas is gone? Why hadn't Thomas been with the other 11, or I guess other 10, when Jesus appeared to them? Why? And if you look at the book Desire of Ages, by the way, if you would like to do some Sabbath afternoon reading, Desire of Ages, chapter 84, I recommend you read it. It's wonderful insight. But if you look at the Desire of Ages in chapter 84, you'll find this information. As Ellen White paints the picture, in the Desire of Ages, she says that gloom and unbelief had filled his heart. When Thomas saw Jesus die on the cross and be buried, it had affected him so badly that depression and discouragement and despair came upon him, and he wanted to be left alone. And so therefore he wasn't with the other 10 disciples when Jesus came to the upper room. He wanted to be alone. I think Thomas was a stuffer. Do you know what a stuffer is? It's someone who under stress, or who when they're having discouragement or trial or trouble, they don't want to deal with it and they stuff it. Men, some of your wives have accused you of this. I'm positive of that. Some of your wives, some of you have done it too. A stuffer. Some of you are like this. You just, when you're having discouragement and despair and trouble and trial and depression, you just want to be left alone. And it seems as though that was the problem with Thomas. You know, I can really understand that, because, to be honest, I'm a little bit that way. When I am under a lot of stress and I should be talking to someone to help me process it, I would rather be left alone. So I can kind of appreciate Thomas. So what did Thomas do? He withdrew alone when what he really needed was support and fellowship. We miss a great deal when we approach discouragement and trial and trouble like this. You know, they say misery loves company. Unfortunately, oftentimes when people are miserable, they want to be left alone. But it's good that when we are having troubles and trials and problems in our life, it's good to be with other people who love us. William Barclay, in his commentary on John, says this: things can happen to us within the fellowship of Christ's church, which will not happen when we are alone. I believe that's true. We minister to one another. We have a stake in one another's lives. Now, this is an interesting sermon to be preaching on the day that I just announced we're going to suspend services again, because we won't be able to be together. But you're short-sighted if you see the only time we as Christians, we as the Atholton Church family, this is not the only time we can be together. on Sabbath morning. I think God, in his wisdom, allowed certain things to come about before this COVID pandemic hit. Zoom. Now, somebody's making a lot of money on Zoom. But what would it be like if we didn't have Zoom to communicate with each other? I'm so zoomed out, though. Some of you are like me, Some days I spend 6 hours on Zoom. And I just sit there on Zoom, and I'm just exhausted when I finish. But there are lots of ways for us as a church family to reach out to others in our church. Let's just be honest, we need each other. We need each other. And so I encourage you during this time that we can't physically meet together because of this virus, I encourage you to call someone. Call one of your brothers and sisters. When everybody has a certain spot they often sit in church, I'd like you to think about the people who usually sit around you in church and call them. Talk to them. Tell them you've missed them. Reach out. And you'll be surprised at how much good it'll do for you and them. We've been talking about amongst the elders and on the pastoral staff trying to establish a number of small groups, probably meeting through Zoom. If you're interested in leading or in being part of a small group, contact one of the pastors. Email us, text us. I'd like to be in a small group, because withdrawing from each other is not what we need right now. It's what caused Thomas his problems. As a matter of fact, it's the first mistake Thomas made. It's the first mistake. And so he wasn't there when Jesus came. Verse 25 of John 20. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will never believe." Now, because he says that, we've called him Doubting Thomas. But he's only asking to do that which the other 10 have done. I'd like to read this phrase like this. He said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails." You guys already have. But unless I see them and place my finger in the mark of the nails and place my hand into his side, I will never believe. Ellen White also suggests in the book Desire of Ages that Thomas felt wounded. He felt left out. Why would Jesus choose a time when he was not there? And perhaps he was hurt by Jesus. The Desire of Ages says he allowed jealousy and unbelief to take possession of his heart and mind. He wanted to see the marks of the nails, put his hands in the marks of the nails. And I think it would have been nice had he believed his colleagues. But I can understand. I don't think it's an unreasonable request. You shouldn't think that Thomas wasn't dedicated to Jesus. His character seems to have been a little different than Peter's, who was all in immediately. Thomas seems to have had a bit of a pessimistic streak, but he was sold out to Jesus. Look in John 11. We don't hear a lot about Thomas. He only plays prominently in about 3 places. But in John chapter 11, verse 16, this is the story of the raising of Lazarus. Remember, when Lazarus dies, Jesus is off in Bethany on the other side of the Jordan. I've been there. It's a fascinating place to be. But he's over there. Jesus is there with his disciples, really way out away from Jerusalem. and and away from Bethany where Mary and Martha and Lazarus live. And they heard that Lazarus is sick, and Jesus stayed there. And so finally, Jesus decides they'll go back to Jerusalem. And the disciples say to him in verse 8, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you're going there again?" They're questioning Jesus. Why are you going there? But listen to Thomas. Verse 11. After saying these things to them, Jesus says, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him." And the disciples said to him, "Lord, if he have fallen asleep, he will recover." Now Jesus had spoken of his death, so that they thought he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, "Lazarus has died, and for your sake I was glad I was not there, so that you would believe. So let us go to him." Verse 16. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." What a pessimist. But sold out to Jesus. "I'm not going to let you go and die alone, Master." He's going to follow him. He's loyal. He's courageous. But he's also pessimistic. And he's doubting. You know, doubt is a very powerful emotion. I have to tell you, I've suffered from doubt in my life. I know, I draw a salary to have faith, right? I get paid not to doubt. But I can understand doubt. Sometimes education is not the friend of faith. You know, science is very powerful. I've known many people who have lost their faith because science has proven there is no God. Personal friends who have lost their faith because of the scientific method. It contradicts faith. A lot of archaeology seems to contradict the Bible. And so a lot of archaeologists have nothing to do with the Bible. It's a nice book that was written, but it's not of any fact. You know, it's easy to doubt. And I've gone through those times in my own personal experience when I've had doubts. But then I ask myself this question: who are you going to believe? Your doubts or the word of the living God? For me, it has come down to that basic choice. Who am I going to believe? The doubts that men have planted in my brain, or the truths that the living Word of God has taught me? I'm so thankful that during my growing up years, my mother did everything she could to put me in an environment where I could build faith. I'm thankful my mother encouraged me in my faith journey. She couldn't believe for me, but she created an environment where I learned to love Jesus and I learned to want to serve him. Hence, I decided to become a pastor. That's been 45 years ago. Parents, never get weary in the pursuit of teaching your children to love Jesus and build their faith. Do everything that is in your power, parents here, parents online. Do everything in your power to put your children in a place where they can learn to love Jesus. In my little hometown of Scottsburg, Indiana, my mother must have driven 1 billion miles taking me to youth meetings. And it was about 10 miles into the church. And my mother would not let the church be opened for youth meetings, and I wasn't there. She put herself out with her time and her money, paying gas, paying money for gas we didn't have. But she put herself out. I know many will fall away, yes, but parents, do everything you can to create an environment where faith can grow for your children. Never get tired of that, because it will pay dividends. They will learn how to deal with doubt. We continue reading in chapter 20, verses 26 and 27. He has just said, I'll never believe unless I put my finger into his wounds. Verse 26. 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. I suspect that after having missed him once, he was not going to allow that to happen again. 8 days later, his disciples were inside again. They were in the upper room, and Thomas was with them. And although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas. Now, think about how Thomas is feeling right now. Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Do not disbelieve. Now, Thomas knows that the other disciples have not seen Jesus in those 8 days. Jesus was not in the upper room, at least visibly in the upper room, when Thomas had made his declaration that I will not believe unless I see the nail prints in his hands. And yet Jesus comes immediately to Thomas, and Thomas knows that Jesus knows of his doubt. And so Jesus doesn't really scold him, but he says, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." In the book Desire of Ages, Ellen White writes this about this encounter. In his treatment of Thomas, Jesus gave a lesson for his followers. His example shows us how we should treat those whose faith is weak and who make their doubts prominent. Jesus did not overwhelm Thomas with reproach, nor did he enter into controversy with him. He revealed himself to the doubting one. Thomas had been most unreasonable in dictating the conditions of his faith, but Jesus, by his generous love and consideration, broke down all the barriers. Unbelief is seldom overcome by controversy. That's such a powerful phrase. Jesus could have looked at him and said, "Oh, Thomas, shame on you. These 10 guys over here, you've known them all this time. Would they lie to you?" He could have condemned him. But this is such a powerful phrase. We would do well to remember this in our dealing with our brothers and sisters and our friends and our relatives. Unbelief is seldom overcome by controversy. It is rather put upon self-defense and finds new support and excuse. You know, people, when you kind of condemn them, become defensive. And she's pointing out that's not what Jesus did. But let Jesus in his love and mercy be revealed as the crucified Savior. And for many once willing lips, and from many once unwilling lips will be heard the acknowledgement of Thomas, "My Lord and my God." Jesus did the exact thing. He says, "Here, Thomas, look." And he doesn't really say it here, but I don't believe Thomas did it. I don't believe Thomas actually put his finger in his side. But rather, Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Now, this is a very powerful phrase, actually. It's not just to be done away with. The phrase is not just a catchphrase, my Lord and my God. The Greek word for Lord is kurios. It means Lord. It means master. It means leader to a follower. So a follower would call his leader kurios, master. The Lord of your life. I believe, Thomas is saying, and follow. The word kurios is the title that a slave would have called his master. Kurios. And so when Thomas calls Jesus kurios, he's giving him his all. You're my master. And then he says, God. My Lord and my God. The word in Greek, most of you know it probably, is theos. It means God, the divine one. And when Thomas calls Jesus theos, when he calls him my God, he is declaring, as Peter did in Caesarea Philippi, you are the Son of the living God. He's declaring that Jesus is the divine Son of God. And so it was that Thomas dedicated the rest of his life to Jesus. And after that, verse 29, Jesus says this, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. It almost sounds like a rebuke, but I'm not sure it is. It's just a statement. And who is included in the latter statement? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. That's us. Because we haven't been able to see those nail prints, but we still believe. Listen, folks, never let someone's past color how you treat them in the future. Thomas looked unbelieving, doubting, but he was sold out to Jesus. You know, sometimes in our lives we know people who have made mistakes in the past. We know people who have done some bad things in their past. And oftentimes, let's just be honest, oftentimes we as a church have held those things against our members who have made mistakes, and it's colored how we treat them or how we look at them all of their lives. I remember when I graduated from Indiana Academy. I wasn't a bad boy. I wasn't necessarily a good boy. But I wasn't a bad guy. It would have been interesting to see how my teachers would have filled the blank in front of my name, blank Frank. I'm almost afraid to know that. But I graduated from Indiana Academy. I went to Andrews University for my freshman year. And at the end of my freshman year, I came back to Indiana and was invited to be the boys' dean at Indiana Academy for the summer dean. Well, when that news started getting around, there were a few faculty members, my old teachers from a year ago, that raised some eyebrows. And I remember one of them said, didn't say it to me, but said it to someone else. One of them said, it must be a different Frank Zollman than I know. I'm not sure how they would have filled in that blank in front of my name, but I don't think it would have been positive. Must be a different Frank Zollman than I know. But you know what? It was. My freshman year in college, I experienced my adult conversion. I had a conversion when I was 11 years old. I was baptized when I was 11 years old. It was a powerful experience. September 11, I was baptized when I was 11 years old. But through the years, I had grown weary in well-doing. Wasn't following Jesus. I wasn't far away, but I wasn't following very close. So my freshman year in college, I experienced an adult conversion because of a week of prayer held by Elder Maury Venden. My freshman year in college, I was a chemistry math major. I wanted nothing to do with being a preacher. But after my adult conversion experience and a summer of deep wrestling, I decided that I would follow the path to ministry. I felt that call, and I would follow the call. So in many ways, I was a different Frank Zollman. And Thomas was a different Thomas. Never let a mistake that you've made in your past dictate your future. That's what the gospel is all about. That's what forgiveness is all about. That's what grace is all about. And Thomas learned that. We don't know a lot about Thomas after this story. We don't know a lot. But this is where tradition comes in. There are lots of stories about Thomas after the close of the New Testament, after these stories. And it seems as though that the 12 now disciples kind of decided that they would go different directions. There was a lot of persecution going on, and each of the disciples went a different direction. And history and tradition tells us that Thomas went to India. And Thomas took the gospel to India. Historical records tell us by the time certain visitors visited India in the year 500 AD that there were already Christian churches there. And there were Christian churches there that said their founder was the Apostle Thomas. And so Thomas went to India and preached the gospel. But he also met some opposition. And you know there's only of the 12 original apostles, after Judas was replaced, of the 12 original apostles, only John died a natural death. And Thomas went to India, and there he was speared to death for Jesus. No longer doubting, but as someone wrote, those were good answers. Filling in the blank. As someone wrote, Thomas was all in for Jesus. No longer doubting. His words out there in the wilderness at the time of Lazarus' death was almost prophetic. He says, "Let us go, that we may die with him." Well, it didn't happen that week, but that's what happened. So, I like to think of this word, blank Thomas. Faithful Thomas. Faithful Thomas. And the others were really good too. Courageous Thomas, someone wrote wherever they went. Courageous Thomas. Overcomer Thomas. All of those are true. And so I encourage you today to learn this lesson from Thomas. I'm looking forward to meeting Thomas in heaven. I'd really like to see the guy. Well, let's sing as we close. We're going to sing just the chorus and then the verse. "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus."